Welcome to the, what do we call it? It's about magic something, the beginnings.
Launch of magic.
The launch of Magic the Gathering. I'm Peter Atkinson, I'm your host today. I want to say real quick, it wouldn't have been right to this panel without inviting Richard Garfield, the designer of magic. Unfortunately, Richard has a great excuse. Richard and Coney. Coney, his wife, is having twins. Had twins. Yeah. Well, but when I talked to him, it was like going to be sometime this summer.
Yeah, that's right.
And Richard was like, I'm not going anywhere this summer. I think he missed the birth of one of his other kids because he was at a Tokyo Grand Prix or something like
Tokyo.
that. And he's like, no, I'm going to block off 4 months, not going anywhere. But I videoed him in an interview, but I forgot to bring it. But my colleague is off going to my room looking for it. So we may have a little video of him a little later in our program. So I would invite, let's start on that end with Carol. Come down, everybody. Oh, y'all introduce yourselves and kind of like a little what you were doing in early Wizards of the Coast days around the launch of Magic.
Well, I feel like I got invited to this, but I did not quite actually work at Wizards of the Coast when Magic started. I was, however, a very nervous shareholder. We had been friends with the folks in the company for, I don't know, a year or so at that point, and I think my darling husband, James Ernest, had juggled at the company picnic the previous...
That's right, when Magic got launched.
That's right. So several months after the launch of Magic, I came on as director of sales, working for Lisa.
That's true.
So.
I think you also made your share buying the week before Gen Con, because I remember, I think your shares actually helped us pay for the booth we had at Gen Con.
Because I had asked Peter, because I committed, I'm like, I'm absolutely in, but when's the last day I can give this to you? And he was like, right before Gen Con. I'm like, here you go.
I was like, yes, we can go.
All right, Beverly.
I'm Beverly Marshall Saling. I was the executive editor at Wizards and employee number 2 after Lisa. Second person to get paid. And I was the editor for Magic for most of definitely for the original set and all the way through the Dark. I think was the last set I personally did, and then I managed the editing team after that.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
I'm Kathleen Atkinson. It's our basement that the products were started in, and as a matter of fact, we went through both alpha and beta still in our house. So we counted all the cards and filled all the distribution boxes. And then Peter and I went on a tour with a bunch of the alpha cards all the way down the West Coast. Yes. We did a J took off from Denver to come to our first big Gen Con at that time. I keep telling people, we had 30 people to a hotel room, which was close.
What's close?
Most people have heard what happened at that particular Gen Con with the people that ran at that time, which wasn't us, were not very happy with us because it was just not organized to handle that many people who are going to stand in line in order to buy their alpha cards. My most vivid memory, though, is I had all the money, which I would never complain about.
In a cash box.
In a cash box, and we totaled it out it was like 70 grand or something that first week. And there were no banks open on Sunday and we were flying out on Sunday. And so we're like, okay, well, and so I go through security with all this money and more importantly, a great big box of coins. So they couldn't see through the coins. Anyway, it became a long and drawn out thing just to get back to Seattle with all that money. Anyway, go ahead.
Lisa Stevens was systems integrator, or was I vice president by then? I don't remember. I found my old business card that says systems integrator. I still don't know what that means, but I was doing at the time, I was doing practically everything. Sales, marketing, warehouse labor, helping with some art stuff, though we had Jesper by then. I'm not sure if he quite took over the art.
You were never too far away from the pre-press department.
Yeah, everything. Small company in the basement of Peter's house is pretty much all hands on deck. Everybody did whatever anybody needed to do to kind of get stuff done. But it was a lot. Employee numero uno. Yes. Stolen from White Wolf. We'll talk about that in another panel, though.
I'm Scaphulius. I was a office mate of Richard Garfield, and so mainly my job was to provide someone for him to play his games with or against. And so that's what we did. We just hung out there and played a bunch. And then over time, as Magic became closer and closer to becoming a reality, then he started asking everyone for money. So we were all forced to cough up some money for Garfield games, and then eventually he turned over all the jobs he didn't want to do to us, like develop the game, develop like legends, and talk to other design teams. Write the rules. He did not want to write the rules.
Finish
that
writing
sort of
the
stuff.
cards,
Finish writing the cards, that sort of thing.
taking his notes, and But we all love Richard. Yeah,
He's not here to defend himself.
yeah, he's not here to defend himself. You might see the video later. But, okay, so I'm Peter Atkinson, along with Kathy and a few people who aren't here, founded the company in 1990 and was the CEO up until we sold it to Hasbro in 2001. So, well, I was there till 2001. We sold it in 99, whatever. Anyway, close enough. I don't really worry about being that truthful with you. As long as it's close, it's good enough. As I get older, John Peterson's going to come along and write a book and clarify it all and change all the stuff.
Good.
Anyway,
Someone needs to.
Okay, well, I thought I would start off with a little WotC story, and then we'll just kind of go and jump in. And we decided we're just going to kind of do this. Well, I decided, and nobody objected. We're just kind of going to do this squabbling family style, like just start telling stories and jump in.
Liar.
No
I
way.
think it'd be kind of fun. And then, but if somebody's not getting any words in, I'll try and help make sure everybody gets a little time on this. So, I think since this is Gen Con and Magic came out at Gen Con in 1993, I kind of like to tell a little story about that. And we're going to go on the tour this morning because it's going to be the same story. I apologize for that. Well, you'll find out that I'll probably tell it differently. And I'll probably take, I remember you were on that tour. Okay, so just one of you, thank God you didn't all raise your hands. Okay, so when Magic the Gathering came out, we've been doing some role-playing games. Wizards of the Coast was started to do role-playing games. We had no idea we were going to meet Richard Garfield and that he would invent magic and our lives would change forever. By the time Magic came out, our role-playing games had not done that well, and we were borderline bankrupt. Okay.
They sold 20,000 copies of Talismana.
Critically acclaimed. Yeah, critically, yeah. But I mean, in terms of where we, anyway, we were doing so well that I laid everybody off at Christmas and was
That
wondering.
was because of a lawsuit, but we don't want to talk about that
Yeah,
one.
okay. So good. Now we got the rhythm going. Okay, so so Magic was really one of those, bet the whole company on it. We raised money to print the cards. We weren't. It was like either this was going to happen or the company was going to go out of business. Our shareholders were nervous.
Yes.
Yeah.
But excited. Nervous but excited.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the way shareholders you want to keep them at about right there. That's perfect. So Gen Con was the big release. We had sold a few into distribution, so there was just a seed of stuff. By the way, did anybody here play Magic in 1993? There's a couple of you. Okay, all right, a couple. Yeah.
Chills.
So, yeah, chills. We had Magic coming out. We're going to do Gen Con. This is going to be the big release. That's where a major part of our first product shipment was going to. So we go to Gen Con. We set up our booth. We're ready to go. It's Wednesday, setup day. Our product's not there. There are no Magic cards on the loading dock because they get shipped by the freight forwarder or whatever. So we're like, oh, this is scary. And so Thursday morning, show opens. Go down to the loading dock.
We got nothing.
And there's nothing there. There's no.
I'm on the phone
Yeah.
constantly. Well, they shipped it in like a United Airlines, like in the bottom of one of their 747s coming over from China or whatever, Or actually, it wasn't China. It was
Belgium.
Belgium or whatever.
China.
China now.
Anyway.
Whatever.
So Thursday, there's no cards. We're going back, checking. She's trying to run it down because she's a systems integrator.
Yeah.
And
I do everything, remember?
there was a failure to integrate.
I was integrating right up here at that time.
So all day Thursday, no cards. So it's only a 4-day show, right? So
Best
There were
4
some
days.
cards.
what?
We brought our personal cards.
Oh, there's some personal
Because
cards.
we had to demo
Yeah,
the
we
game
were
when there was no
demoing it,
product
but
to
we
sell.
couldn't. Yeah, we were demoing the card with our personal card, but we couldn't sell it. So Friday morning, go down there. Still no cards. Friday morning, but we're waiting. There are people that are loitering by our booth. There are gamers waiting to pounce, ready. Like, when is this game coming out? You know, when there's going to be a product. So Friday afternoon, I think it was around 2:00, we get the word the cards have arrived. And so we go back to the loading dock, and we just get, the gamers are all waiting. They just all follow. Yeah, come with us. Let's go back and get the Magic cards. So we get about 20 gamers. We're all picking up the boxes and bringing them back to the booth.
I wonder how many went missing. Like,
You know, I remember Jay carried 2 boxes because he was a very studly dude.
He was a big guy.
Yeah, he was a strong guy. We get back there. Okay, give us a minute. We're opening up the boxes, getting out the cash register. Well, or
there wasn't a
Slip.
register.
The
So
cash
have
box
slips.
and the paper receipt.
Yes.
yes, the
We
cash.
set up a chain, actually, so there was people all down the table taking money in.
4 people at a time. 1 person taking orders and picking up product, 1 person calculating how much tax and everything, you running the cash box and me writing receipts.
Perfect. There you go. There you go. And so then, now, this is great because we all get our stories straight here, right? The memory changes it. We would not be dishonest or even spin the story.
Alternate facts.
So yes. So this first group of customers get what they want and then they leave, right? Well, now it's back to demo time. Now, in these days, nobody knows what a trading card game is. Now everybody understands. In those days, we're demoing Magic 1 person at a time, and it's kind of hard work. It's like, what? We each need our own deck of cards? I mean, if we're gonna play this card, we both have to buy, me and my buddy both have to buy a starter deck, $9.95 for a deck of cards. These are
$8.95.
$8.95.
Plus tax.
Plus tax.
$8.95 for deck of cards. Yeah. And okay, so okay, we'll buy the 2 decks of cards, right? And that's the way it goes the rest of the day. Okay, at night we leave the booth. People playing Magic all over the place,
Right.
like
On the
we're
floor.
stepping over them on the floor, right? Stuff like that. Well, this is encouraging. This is pretty cool.
They like it.
Saturday, come back to the booth, and then right off the bat, all those people we sold starter decks to the previous day, they're coming back. Now, can you explain to me what was this about a booster pack? Now wait a minute. I could take these cards and just add them to my deck? Well, yeah, you can. Although you may consider which cards you should add to your deck. And maybe there's some cards in your deck you shouldn't have in your deck. Well, what good are they, you know?
Well, we can make other decks of them.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll take 2 booster packs, right? Well, then Sunday, of course, they come back and they're like, can I just buy a whole box of those booster packs?
But by then we were rationing them because
Yes.
we were running out of it.
I know, I'm going to disagree with you on that one, Beverly. We did not ration, I'm sure, any cards on the first Gen Con because we had cards left over. We actually, Sunday, when we were shutting down, I know, because I'm very confident in this one. The reason I know is because, yeah, we had hoped we would sell out, but we didn't. And we had, I don't know how many boxes it was that were still on the floor.
We
but
sold it to a distributor.
we sold it to a distributor.
Yeah, I
I think it was Max came by. It was Max or
the Armory or Chessex, one of the ones.
or Don or Michael,
Yeah,
one of
might
the
have
guys.
been one of those
One of the
ones.
big distributors came by and said, "You got any product left over?" They figured it out. Now,
No, thank God.
yeah. I mean, the guy at War Games West had already figured it out.
Yeah, well, that was right after the con, though.
Yeah, but this was at Gen Con.
Yeah.
One of the distributors was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be the deal.
I think I
one
went looking.
Yeah, one of the distributors came by and said, "You got any left?" "Yeah, we'll take all of it." And I'm like, and that was probably our biggest order ever at that time.
Probably.
Probably, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I
All right.
remember one of my memories at the end of that Gen Con is, so TSR at the time, the TSR was running Gen Con, they'd give out these certificates if you won a tournament or anything, or like a RPGA tournament or whatever. Give you these little things you could go and pick any booth and just use them to get, hey, this is like $5, and then they agreed to basically reimburse us. And so at the end of the con, you had to go back and get it reimbursed, and people were standing in line with 2 or 3 of these things, and we had a stack like this tall. And I walk up and I hand it, and they go, they look at me and they go, "Who the hell are you?" Well, we're Wizards of the Coast. They go, "Who the hell is Wizards of the Coast?" I'm like, "We can make Magic the Gathering." I said, "What the hell is Magic the Gathering?" And they had no freaking clue. And it was just so funny. And I remember just saying, "Please, money?" And, and it was like $900. It was like, they gave it to me in cash. And it was funny. I'll never forget that because they were just like, "Who is this company?"
Hey, Beverly, you want to start us down another tale of early Magic?
The main thing that I remember about that Gen Con was that once people started pouring through, it was continuous.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a huge line. It was running down in front of other people's booths. They were mad at us because people couldn't get to their booth. And so we were just frantically getting people through the line as fast as we could with a calculator and a cash box and a carbon receipt pad. And after a while, by the time we got to mid to the end of the day, Saturday, I had written so many receipts that my finger split open and started bleeding.
Blood sacrifice and Native American traditions.
I was kind of just sort of staring at it and looking about and say, "Hey, do we have a first aid kit? Do we have Band-Aids? Anything like that?" Because everybody's like, "I don't know, just do it, I'm doing stuff here." And I finally turned to Kathleen next to me and said, well, what should I do? And she just said, "Don't bleed on the money."
See, and this is just making me think of Gen Con 94, because we said we need some, ropes and stanchions to do our line management. Like, nah. And then the first day happened, and then they got us some ropes and stanchions.
Didn't it go all the way around the entire exhibit hall?
Basically, they put our line against the back wall, and then,
Yeah,
but at first it was just all through the hallway
Well, we had the Legends release.
because we had legends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we had
Legends.
not the release, but we had Legends at
Yeah.
Gen Con.
Right.
And we had advertised that we would be
Dark
selling it at retail, that we would be selling Legends booster
Antiquities.
packs at,
It was out of retail stores by then. I mean, for really high
Right.
prices only.
yeah.
So that first convention, we actually had only 2 tables.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we
20
shared
bucks.
it with
Oh, yes.
magazine,
Sh-
Cryptic Magazine.
Oh, yes.
Oh, Cryptic Magazine.
Yeah,
Joanne?
She
Yeah.
shared
Oh,
her booth
really?
with us.
I forgot that.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Right, well, they're 10-foot tables, so,
Yeah.
yeah. it's
Yeah, who
pretty
needs
cute.
all that room?
That's right.
Yeah.
Pretty solid little party.
Well, we did have a role-playing product too.
But I did want to point out that the exact same thing happened about 6 months later at the German Toy Fair. Only the scale was, I mean, we had big conventions here, but they have mammoth conventions over there. And so we had the same issue of no access to a bank, all this money. So JJ and I drove it back to Belgium, hoping we wouldn't get carjacked. So that we could put it in the bank on Monday.
That's great. So I also want to say, by the way, all stories of early WotC days, Magic, let's keep it on Magic the Gathering, but anything related to Magic before publication, after, you guys don't care, right? Just want to hear us talk.
There's one
Yeah.
story that I want to tell just to,
Yeah.
clear my professional reputation a little bit.
But it's stellar. Your professional reputation is amazing.
But I feel I do need to explain the story of how Charlie Catino's name got spelled wrong.
Yes.
In the original Magic rulebook, when it was time to do the credits, I had been working solely with Richard, and he was, at this point, Richard is in Walla Walla, everybody else is in Peter's basement, and because I don't drive and I live like a 2-hour bus ride away from Peter's house, I was kind of in my own little annex in our apartment, working by myself, and everything was done on email and phone. So I asked Richard, okay, who do you want to list, for playtest and design credits? And he gave me this list of names, and I didn't have anything to check it against, so I just plugged it right in there.
So it's
And-
Richard's fault.
Well, and then the game came out, and somebody said, and then somebody came to me and said, "Hey, Charlie's name's spelled wrong." And I'm like, "Oh no, I don't want to do that. So how's it supposed to be spelled?" And they told me, and I honestly don't remember who that was at this point, but I got the new name plugged in there and made sure that next time something came out, it would come out with that spelling. And then whatever that was, I don't even remember now, came
It's
out.
also wrong.
That's also wrong.
It was also wrong.
And then we started purposely misspelling his name.
Well, and
because
what
that became
happened
like a
is
thing.
that after that, I said, "Okay, I need to talk directly to Charlie. Somebody hook me up with Charlie's email." And so I talked to him and said, "Look, I'm so sorry. I can't believe we spelled it wrong twice." And he was just the best sport about the whole thing. He said, "Oh, I know. I think it's funny. I think you should never spell it right. And I think you should spell it a different way every time." And so after that, in the Magic Style Guide, there's a list of all of the ways Charlie's name has been spelled, and one of the editor's responsibilities each time is to come up with a new one.
Check your credits, folks.
True
True story.
All right, Scaff, your turn.
Oh, my turn.
Yeah. Send us down a new tale.
I can remember, because Richard didn't really want to do it, I can remember Legends. Because everyone was designing sets, so if you wanted to design a set, you just submitted it to Peter, and then the process was he would say yes, and then we would have to go clean it up. And the Legends cards were Peter's friend Steve Connard.
Your friend too.
Yeah, my friend too. Although no, I didn't know him at the time.
you didn't know him,
At the
though.
time, I didn't know him at all. And he's like, "Oh yeah, one of my buddies that I used to play D&D with wants to do a Magic set, and you guys have to fix it." And Richard read it, and he was like, "Nope, sorry, not gonna do it." There were a lot of really good ideas in it for those of you that have played Legends, but they didn't. They sort of just wrote things super colloquially. Beverly, you probably remember quite a few of the things from that set.
Unfortunately, the real problem for editing with that set was that was the set after the car crash.
Oh.
So all of the editors, were involved in a car crash that gave us all whiplash, and I couldn't physically sit up at that point.
Yeah, that's
So the
hard.
way Legends got edited was I lay on my couch, and there was a circle of people around my kitchen table who we had identified who could in fact read and write. And they were going through all the cards, and I was trying to tell them, here's some basic stuff you need to watch for, and then if there's anything you have a question about, bring it over here. And so people were just coming to me and showing me card wordings while I was lying down, and I was trying to sort of figure it out, but I was also on pain meds, and that was just really...
And if I'm remembering correctly, there was also at that point like a style decision that we weren't going to use stuff out of like real literature after Arabian Nights. And so
For
we
the
had to go through
books.
the renaming of all the cards that had Shakespearean or other sort of real world
Yeah,
names.
there was a lot of non-real literature in Legends as well, though. Like, it was pretty bad.
There were some funny names.
But
were
that's
some funny
part of
names.
why the colloquialisms
Right.
weren't all quite so ironed out as they should
Yeah. Maybe that caused the style guide.
Yeah.
So some of the cards would be like gaseous form, which I think might have made it into Legends. I'm not sure. And the original text for it was the creature becomes gaseous. That's the rules. That's the rules text. So
know what that means.
So then I remember we worked on it for quite a while, and then we went up to Canada. Peter and I drove to Canada, and it was just the two of us, and we went to their house, and I can still remember. Just sitting down to go over the cards, and we had just gotten there, and they're like, "Would you like some rye?" You remember that?
Yeah.
And he had a jug, like a like a jug of rye. This was maybe Robin,
Yeah,
right?
probably
Yeah.
Robin.
And I'm like, yeah, sure. And he takes like a milk glass and just pulls the thing and just fills it up. And here's your glass of rye. And then everyone had some rye, and then we started working on Legends.
Made it go a lot better.
See, that might be why we
So
had
I was trying to describe to them, the gaseous form, and we had to attach some rules to it that made sense, and like maybe the creature didn't take damage in combat or something like that. And they're like, well, no, but they wanted, like, if you cast Fireball, it should absolutely do damage to it. And and I said, all right, but if it was Lightning Bolt, then no, it shouldn't do damage to it. And I'm like, well, how? I'm like, well, what do you want? And I'm like, what's happening here? And he's like, well, it's just like the creature becomes like a ball of gas, eh? And that was their explanation. That was their explanation for the rules. It was like a ball of gas, eh? So, whatever would affect a ball of gas would, affect the creature.
Because that'll fit on the card.
It's a fire, for sure.
And that was one of 300 cards. So,
But I do remember it was some of the folks in the office doing a renaming session late at night one night.
Yeah.
we still joke about one of the original names that you guys killed. The Axelrod Rim Thruster was one of those.
And not in their defense, but I think it was originally spelled Axelrod Rim Thirster.
That's what Steve claims. I don't think that's correct. I think
But it became something else.
With Steve's ability to spell, I would.
Yeah. But I remember this because an artist had me be Titania, Queen of the Fairies, and then of course it wasn't that when it got into the set.
Yeah. Well, and I remember too, we were trying to come up with, he had all these things that were this halfling, that halfling.
right.
And we're like, we can't use halfling TSR, we'll be mad at us. And, so.
Let's use Hobbit instead.
What we did was we went back to Primal Order, we had religion listed in Primal Order where, we had again wanted to not say Hobbit or halfling, and so we had decided to call them Kithkin. And so now they were called the Kithkin in Magic, so there's this little Primal Order Magic connection there.
Nice.
Carol, you got a story for us?
Do I have a story for you? Wow, I'm trying to think of something that's like early. And, well, mostly I'm remembering my first business trip with Kathleen, which was the February after Magic had come out, when we decided to go to the Paris Toy Fair and then discovered that there was a much bigger toy fair the next weekend. So she called and said, we're staying an extra week.
We're going. We're in the car in the middle of winter to go drive on the Audubon.
Yeah, and
back
she had to
later.
drive because I can't drive a stick. Down the Audubon in the snowstorm. It was exciting.
And like a tiny car that you thought if you just hit an ice cube, it would flip over.
And somewhere along there, and I believe it was in Nuremberg, we did meet with Hasbro.
We did.
Yeah, we
At
did.
the toy fair, yeah.
And we said, gosh, we've got this company with this dynamite little product, and we're really growing and doing great things, and you could buy the company. You could buy the company for like $5 million.
That was probably Tom
but her and I
Dusenberry. You
were
never
there.
forgot it.
And yeah, I remember that with a warm feeling in my heart many years later.
Go away, kids, you're bothering me.
Yeah.
Because they wound up paying quite a bit more than that.
Yeah. Lisa, you want to dive in on
There's
one?
so many. All right, I'll tell. So I was doing sales at the time, and I've done sales of Vampire the Masquerade, Ars Magica, Talismanta, Primal Order. I've done role-playing products, and we had this product that I remember trying to explain this to distributors. Okay, so we got these decks of cards. It's a card game. They're great. So, everybody plays it. Buys one deck, and no, there's boosters. They're tradable. Oh, so they're trading cards. Well, yeah, they're trading cards. Okay, well, and then they sell those in booster packs. Yeah. Well, then why do you need the decks? Well, because I was just trying to explain it to them, and they're just like, well, how can it be trading a card game and trading cards? And they were just really confused. And so we had very little money at the time. We were basically putting every last penny into getting to Gen Con with those products, which is why I was having a heart attack when they weren't there.
Yeah.
And so our biggest distributor at the time was a distributor called Capital City. And Capital City was in Madison, Wisconsin. And, if we came out with a new Talislanta product, they would usually take about 200 copies or something like that. And so we actually took an ad out and spent our entire ad money on one ad in their little previews kind of thing that they had for retailers to look at. And I was hoping we could, they're going to get a decent, a decent order from these guys. And they were usually one of the first orders that came in. They usually came in almost like 2 months ahead of time, 2-3 months ahead of time. And so the order comes in from Capital City. I open it up, and they ordered 3. 3 decks. Not displays of decks. 3 decks.
The whole ad budget.
And that same one, they ordered like 216 copies of Complete Alchemist. But they ordered 3 decks. And we had spent like thousands of dollars on this ad. And I was just freaking out like, this is our biggest distributor. 3 decks, we're doomed. And I remember Peter came and looked, and I slid in my drawer and hid that thing underneath there. And Peter came in and asked like, hey, did we get the order? Did we get the order from Capital City? I'm like, Peter hasn't come in yet, I'll ask him. And I kept pushing him off and lying about it because I figured at that stage he was so high strung. I mean, Peter was just like this. And I thought if he knew
Hard to
that,
imagine.
he might have just gone out and done himself in. Because it was just like, I really seriously was so worried about what would happen if they thought, okay, the gig's up. And so we came up with an interesting idea at the time, and that was that we, because we were going to go out of business if this didn't happen, I went to every distributor and I made this little coupon, and some of the old guard will still have their coupons in their pockets now. It basically looked like a dollar bill. And it had a picture of me on it, and it said Lisa Stevens, warehouse laborer, and it said, we will refund your entire first order of Magic the Gathering cards up to 1 month after you order.
Yep.
And so that I was trying to encourage them, even though they didn't understand this thing, to take a bigger order, because I kept telling them, I kept saying, look, I've been here for Vampire the Masquerade and stuff. You know me. I wouldn't tell you it's a big thing unless
You
it
hustle.
was.
You hustle.
Oh, freaking I had to hustle because it was like my job. It was like I was gonna be gone.
The whole company.
Yeah, the whole company's gonna be gone. So I had to hustle my butt off to get this thing. And so, so they ordered pretty good, and it had a pretty decent order, and then then Peter does this little thing down the West Coast, right? And retail stores are starting to call up and say, where can I get Magic? Where can I get
This
Magic?
is on the way to Gen Con.
On the way to Gen Con.
Yeah.
So,
We
so
had-
Peter's,
4 or 5 boxes of Magic. We filled up. Kathy and I went down. We filled up the van with Magic cards and
hit all the stores
Store to
down the
store.
West Coast,
Yep.
down through Phoenix and up to Denver.
We had
and then-
people follow us.
It was, and so, but all these stores couldn't find Magic then, right?
yeah.
And so I started compiling a list of these stores. And then, so also I get a phone call from this guy down in Georgia and Atlanta, a distributor down there, and he calls me and goes, Lisa, this game ain't selling. I want to return every one. And I was just like, what do you mean it's not selling? No one wants to buy this around here. I want to take that offer up. And so I said, hang on, I get another call. And I put them on hold, and I went to their phone, and I called all those retailers up. I said, hey, these guys in Georgia, they have it. They have Magic, and then they called every one of those guys, and I waited a few more minutes, and I went back to the phone, and I said, hey, okay, so here, you can send the cards here. And he goes, I'm sold out, I'm going to buy
That's
That's how you
sales.
sell stuff.
That's sales.
more. 101, man.
We have that one Japanese distributor who advertised in the paper that he had Magic finally in Japan. And when he got to the store, the lines were around the block, and he had one case. So there was actually a riot at that store.
Our first Magic riot.
Tell the story about how you met Richard and Mike Davis and stuff. How Magic, because
Okay, so that's
Which is why you were late to my wedding.
Yes. That's why I was late to your wedding. Yes.
Before I even got to Seattle.
Wait,
So
I wasn't later. I wasn't as late as the person to open the wedding.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But the reason Beverly and Rick, her husband's down here, who has many magic stories as well, was they got married at this church, and the person who was supposed to let them in didn't show up, and so they just didn't skip a beat. They had the wedding out in the parking lot. It was very romantic.
It was technically
so-
on the steps.
On the steps, yes.
And you were
yes.
there?
And I was there.
Barely.
Okay, so how I met Richard Garfield. Back in those days, I was posting a lot on the wonders of the internet in 1991. Which the main wonder was this thing called Usenet, which was like basically a big bulletin board system, and I was active on there. I had the internet bug from an early age, and independently, Richard had been designing games as an amateur game designer. He'd never gotten anything published, and he had a big fan and a friend of his named Mike Davis. And Mike Davis was like, you got to get published. And Richard was like, no, I'm going to go to school and be a mathematician, blah, 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 very responsible. And so Richard told Mike, well, if you can get one of my games published, you can have half of the money, right, whatever it brings in. Mike's like, okay, great. So Mike picked a game, or Richard picked a game, whatever, called Robo Rally, and Mike Davis started pimping this game. And he went to Steve Jackson. I don't know who all he went to, but he went to at least a bunch of the usual suspects. I'm sure TSR and I don't know who all. But and all got rejections. And so he saw me posting about my little role-playing game company, and he reached out to me and said, hey, I know this guy. We got a great game. Blah blah blah. And like, oh, okay. And I would have blown it off except for one thing that I've always really respected people from academia, people with advanced degrees and stuff. And he mentioned that he had a master's degree in mathematics, and that his friend Richard was working on his PhD in combinatorial mathematics, and I had to look it up. And I said, well, these are two really smart dudes. I think I really want to meet them. And so we agreed to meet. They sent out Robo Rally. We played it.
Night and day.
Yeah, we liked it, but it was a little, the game went a little awkwardly, but we liked it. So I went down to Portland to meet these two mathematicians and see, and this is like, I went in and with a straight face told them that I didn't think I could publish their game. But if they wanted to invest money in Wizards of the Coast.
he was also a hustler all the time, trying to find anybody with a spare dime.
Every conversation I had, I would end up soliciting for selling stock in the company. But I said, I really like this game, but it's too complicated for me. We're doing role-playing games or books, basically, and this board game, it's going to have a book. On top of the book, it's going to have a board. It's going to have all these counters and robot plastic figures. It's going to have a box that it goes in. I don't know how to make any of that stuff. So Richard looks at me and he says, well, I'll design a game for you. I'll design any kind of game you want. Richard's not an arrogant guy, but sometimes he's like a little confident, I would say. Like, yeah, I want a challenge. Give me a challenge, I'll take it. So
I got hundreds of games in my head.
Yeah.
Well, you had just been Dragonfly, remember?
Yeah. So it was coming up. So I told him, I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I had been thinking like maybe a card game. Okay? Something real simple, like no components, just cards, no meeples, none of that stuff. We didn't have the word meeple yet. And something quick, something you can play, like while you're waiting for your dungeon master to show up, right? And I'd also really become interested in fantasy and science fiction art. Like I've been going to like NorwestCon and these places. Role-playing games in those days, gaming in general, was not publishing much in the way of fantasy color art. There were some, enough to really whet your appetite, and of course in novels, but I would go to these conventions and I'd see all this great color art that artists were making, and not really getting. So I had this idea that, hey, if you did a card game, we could put different art and different cards, and a lot of these people are selling for really cheap, you know. So honestly, I was thinking that too. So Richard's like, oh, okay. So, and then we kind of parted ways. I kind of half expected I'd never hear from him again. So I go back home, and about 4 or 5 days later, so I'd gone down on the weekend. 4 or 5 days later, I get this call from Richard. He says, hey, I got an idea. I did not know what was about to be unleashed, but okay. He says, I think I should tell you this in person. How about if you're going to Dragonflight next weekend? Why don't I come up to Dragonflight and tell you about this game? So this is 1991 August, and August 24th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I go pick up. So Kim McLaughlin, for some odd reason, was with me,
Yes.
and we're in my pickup.
Yes.
I drove a pickup. We
I
go.
remember the pickup.
What's that?
I remember. I drove it to Origins. Me and Tamara.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. So I drove this. So I go down. I pick him up at the train station, and we had to go by someplace for Ken to get a check. And we were in a parking garage.
Yeah.
It was across from Seattle Center. We go in this parking garage, and we wait for Ken to go and get his check. So I'm standing out there with Richard in the parking garage, and Richard's like, "You want to hear my idea?" Well, yeah, sure. You know, it hit me, right? Says, "Okay, so I got this idea game. So what if there's a card game, but there's lots of cards in this game?" Okay, so now to really appreciate this story, you got to picture a world before any such thing as a trading card game ever existed. This idea was not out there. There was nothing like this, right? There were trading cards, baseball cards, right? That's what trading cards were in those days, was sports cards. That, you know. And so imagine, like, what if we did a game and we packaged it like trading cards, and they were collectible, and there were different rarities, and everybody would have their own collection of cards, and you would build a deck from your collection of cards. And when you play a game, it would be you and your deck against your friend and his or her deck, right? I'm like, and he's explaining this, I'm like, wow, that is mind-boggling. It's like there could be hundreds of cards. Hundreds of cards. Maybe someday thousands of cards. This is like, the dream would be someday there'd be so many cards that there would be people who had never even seen all the cards. We're there now, by the way,
Yeah.
right? We're there. Yeah.
That was. I remember his thing. He kept talking about like someone would play a card and you'd be like, "What's that?"
What does it do? You have to pick it up and have to read it right there on the table and figure out what does this card do. It's like, and so I immediately fell in love with the idea. I had never felt this excited about the idea for a game since 1978 when somebody explained Dungeons and Dragons to me. That was the only other time in my life that my mind was just boom. So I just started jumping up and down. We started whooping and hollering and like, oh my God, this is amazing. And these hoops and hollers are just echoing through the parking garage. And poor Ken, he comes walking back up to us in all these reverberations of our hoops and hollers. And I'm like, Richard, explain it to Ken. Explain, just go through the whole thing again. So Richard like starts in cards and trading and blah, 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 blah. And then all three of us are jumping up and down.
And then you called me on the phone and I started.
Yeah. And I called Lisa.
Because I was in like Wisconsin or something at the time. I was getting ready to go and move out.
Yeah, that's right. So.
Then you came to our wedding, and you were so happy, and we thought, wow, we're locked out of this hall, but we have these supportive friends, and look how happy he is.
Yeah, exactly.
Peter, just this part I know happened, but I don't know the particulars, which is then you had to find someone to print it.
Yeah.
So that was a
I
challenge.
can tell that.
Yeah. I don't want to monopolize the story time.
You know what?
No, that's what I'm saying. Please, I want to hear.
All right, so, and actually, Vic, this is one story Vic wanted me to make sure that got in here. So Vic's my husband. He worked at, well, I think he's back at home right now. Anyway, so we get this, we have this problem, right? It was 300 cards, 310? Four? I don't know. It was
over
a lot of cards, right? And
How many cards in First Magic?
The 290 something, but it was up over 300 once you actually put them all on the sheet like they're supposed to be.
Because
I
it
mean,
was
beta,
over 300.
beta made it 3.0.
Yeah, it was 301, I think, or something like that, just barely over 300. But a bunch of cards were added at the last minute to the set because you wanted to market it as over 300 cards. So Richard actually took cards from Ice Age and put them into the base set.
Okay.
Things,
Ice
things
Age
you
was
didn't know
already
and now you
designed
do.
back then.
All right.
Anyway, so like, we have this, you know, one thing of my jobs was to do all the print buying. And so I'm trying to find a printer. And so you'd find people that would print cards for you, but they only print like set cards, right? Like decks of the same thing over and over. And I remember, and then you go to the trading card people, and they're used to randomization, but they don't know how to make playing cards, right? They make them on things that if you shuffle them, they'll start bending and stuff.
Yeah, square corners and
Yeah,
everything.
square corners and everything else, right? And so I couldn't find the printer, and I remember Ken, that's the story that Vic wanted me to say was, so we were debating how could we get this made, and we thought, well, okay, we could sit there and print all the cards, and then Ken had this idea that he would get this giant wind blower and this huge hopper, and it would blow the cards and randomize them, and then they'd come off a conveyor belt, and someone would be sitting there and
Like one of those lotto machines.
like a lot of machines.
Balls going like this.
That's how crazy we were getting with
He
our
had
ideas.
designed the whole thing.
He actually drew it all up he had a piece of paper and he drew up how it all worked and stuff and then but Richard was like had none of this because Richard's like no, these decks have to be playable.
Yeah.
So he had laid out so we still know how to get this thing printed, and thankfully my old company White Wolf, I talked to them at Gen Con.
Gen Con 92.
Yeah,
92.
right, Gen Con 82. And they came up and they introduced me to a guy named Luke Mertens. And Luke Mertens, he's at the convention here.
He's at the show.
I'm actually having dinner with him tomorrow night.
Yeah.
But he works for a company called Cartamundi over in Belgium. And they were working on something for White Wolf that was going to use Luke Mertens. And somehow I must have talked to them about our little game or something. And they said, hey, I think Luke could help you out. And they introduced me at the convention. And I remember explaining it to him, expecting his eyes to go like, "What? You can't do that." And he goes, "Oh, I think we can make that happen and stuff." And I'm like, "Really?" And stuff. And so in the ensuing months, they're explaining how they have these sheets of cards, and then Richard figured this whole algorithm for putting the cards on the sheets so that when they get cut, they told him how they got cut and how they get drawn off the thing, so that basically when they got drawn off, they would be the types of land with the types of cards.
They didn't explain everything we needed to know. Really.
No, they barely explained it to Richard, and so the first set was okay, but not great. He just tried to distribute things sort of evenly. Then they gave us detailed explanation. We were not allowed to see it. They wouldn't let us see it because it was their secret technology. So he said, we just need to see this machine because you're not describing it very well. And so they gave us a couple paragraph description, extremely detailed, and that's when we laid out the sheets for antiquities. But they had reversed it in their description to us. So that's why there are tons of duplicates in antiquities, because we laid the sheet where the diagonals, cards on the same diagonal going one direction, would never be together, which is what we thought based on their description. But it turns out, no, they're almost always together. So
Well, and Scout,
they needed to be reversed the other way.
Tell me if this is right too. I remember on Antiquities, they also were sort of in a rush and they were very busy at the factory, and they had a machine that would cut the sheets basically in half. And so one of the
Oh,
sets
right.
of sheets
That's-
got split,
that's
so there was
true.
the A half and the B
That's
half.
right.
And then they
Oh.
got randomized, but only
That
within
was-
A and within B.
or-
and some of them went
Or
to
was
the
that
East Coast,
Legends?
and some of them went, no, it was
was
Antiquities.
Antiquities?
Because that's how we wound up with a huge box of ornithopters.
Yeah, that was actually probably the worst collation problem we ever had.
Yeah, we did
And that
a
was
buyback.
based on
We
their
were
most
paying 20
detailed
cents a piece
description.
for those cards.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that when Carol and I went to Cartamundi, not only did they wine us and dine us, but they gave us a tour of the facilities and showed us the machines and how
Yeah,
they
I
work.
can
Yeah, but you were a mathematician.
Yeah, we kept asking for that, and they said, no, you're not allowed to go.
Yeah, they just let us look.
You should have been taking pictures.
Hey, back to the film crew. Could we? What do I do? It seems like a good time
Richard
to.
Garfield liked to speak.
Yeah, Richard is waving his hands, saying, "I'd like to tell a story." So let's give a warm hand to Richard Garfield. Yeah. Okay. Kathy, I haven't told. If you don't mind, why don't you start telling a story while we get this going here? You have one you want to tell? Or is this going to be
Grab the mouse, yeah.
distracting to you? Oh, hold on. This is rude to you for me to.
I have lots of stories about Peter.
Boom. Open folder to view files.
Yep.
That'll work.
Bottom one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we didn't know was the massive
okay, so-
impact
Not the mouse,
of
you
the
had to use the-
secondhand market.
Yeah, okay.
It's in the mouse
Oh,
board.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had no way.
Richard Garfield interview. All right. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Richard Garfield. I really wish I could be here for Gen Con's 50th, but instead you've got a recording of me. So, when Magic first came about, I was actually pitching Robo Rally to Peter Adkison.
This is great. You get to hear the same story from his perspective.
He had a brand new company and was looking for new games, but as a board game, Robo Rally was probably going to be too challenging. He was set up to make books, mostly role-playing books, but he did give me a request, which was for a game that could be played while people waited for events at big conventions like Gen Con. And when I left, I was kind of excited about this idea that I might actually get a game published through Wizards of the Coast. And this design challenge interested me. And about a week later, I was struck with this epiphany. It's most of the time my game design is a process of evolution. I will design something, put it in the closet, come back to it a few months or a few years later and continue working on it. But for once I had this, all at once I knew what I wanted to do, which was work with this idea that players didn't all need to have the same deck, that a game could be almost like a gigantic game where everybody was dealt their own separate hand. This thrilled me. And I shared it with Peter, and he was equally thrilled. We talked about the possibilities of this thing because it just seemed so exciting. But I also remember cautioning him at the time that even though it sounded great, it might not even be possible to make such a game. It seems amazing now. You look back on it like it's so second nature to game designers in the game industry. But at the time, I was thinking, well, if you had poker and you chose your own cards, that wouldn't be fun. If you played bridge with your own cards, that wouldn't be fun. I didn't have any models which really felt like they would support this idea of a trading card game. And it wasn't for a couple months before it was a couple months later that I actually began to figure out how such a thing might work. Yeah, I remember the first and second Gen Con, the players who wanted to compete and play seriously in tournaments. The first one was much more casual, it was much more pickup games. And I think there was a tournament, I'm told there was, but I don't really remember it. I remember a Plague Rat deck won it. My first real memories of a tournament, I think, where we actually paid a little more attention to putting it together was the second Gen Con with Magic, in which there was some French folk who were in the finals, and I think Zach Dolan won that one. And one of my memories from that was in the semifinals or the quarterfinals. There was a player there with a stack of cards in his deck that was about this big. And he was really proud. He was shuffling them up, and his opponent was looking at him and saying, I don't think it's a strict advantage to have a lot of cards in your deck. And he was going, nope, it's much harder to shuffle this way. And it was really actually sobering when I think about how little we knew back then. The players didn't know much. They didn't know anything about thinning your deck or card advantage or anything like that. And as designers, we didn't even know really that this game was possible until a couple of years before, and it seemed like a really new world, a more innocent time.
Hey.
That's the whole thing?
Think a little more, but I think it's a good thing. All right, we'll just stop that there. Here, I know. There we go. That'll do it. Turn off the power. Okay, Kathy. I don't think you've gotten as much time to speak. We've got a story you want to lead us down.
Well, to cap off our tour that we went on, we went from Denver to Gen Con.
Milwaukee.
And we, of course, had people chasing us to get what little product we had. And we, when we got to Gen Con, it was kind of like what we told you about with our 2 tables. But we had actually spent a lot of time as a group trying to figure out how many cards were going to be in that first print run. And then we decided we wanted to rush part of that print run so that we actually had Magic at Gen Con and it could be launched there. So by the time we did all of that and got through that Gen Con, the amount of product we'd asked to be printed, we thought would last us the whole year, like through the end of Christmas season. And so when it became clear that by the end of August we were going to be out of product, we didn't have the means to go in and smooth out and finish tweaking wordings on cards. I think I was telling somebody about the famous, player loses next turn card. Yes. That there are a lot of those that we needed to fix, and we thought we had time. Mm-hmm. But then, so we told Gardamendi, no, you need to rush us another batch. And then that's what became the difference between the alpha batch and the beta batch was. And then we had to turn around. Oh, this is going to last us enough time. We don't need to worry about it. This one we can fix next. And then you ended up with...
Yeah, because we printed like 3 times as many beta.
And then you did revised.
No, unlimited.
Right? And then
Unlimited.
yeah. And it was all
That's
based
the most
on...
misnamed set ever.
But it all was based on us having these really heartfelt conversations. Lisa, can we sell 1 million cards? And then the next one would be, can we sell, I think it went from 1 million to 8 million, the next one. Can we sell 8 million cards?
It seemed unfathomable about
Every single time. He would be laying in bed and he'd be like, there's no way we can sell these many cards. There's just no way. And we just kept, up in that ante. And
I remember Glenn Elliott saying, we're talking Carl Sagan numbers here.
I believe it was my first week on the job. Luke came to visit from Belgium, and we were setting the Legends print run. Mm-hmm. And I had only been on the job 5 days, and I'm like, more, you must print more cards. And you're like, we can only afford this many. I'm like, oh, but more cards.
I mean, as a salesperson, here's what it was like after Magic got big. I remember War Games West was one of our biggest people, and I remember talking to them on the phone. Wayne Godfrey was the owner, and he'd be like, all right, Lisa, we need more Magic here. I'd like to order, give me 100 cases, right? And okay, and then we'd be talking more, and he goes, you better make that 200 cases. And then he'd be talking more, and like, how many cases you got in the warehouse, And literally, he ordered every one in the warehouse, and that was right before when Alpha was finishing up. And then everybody was doing that. Everybody's coming and saying, and so finally, I remember a bunch of the I think it was Chessex or Armory or some of these guys all came out, and they said. We all got to talking. We said, one of the biggest problems is getting product here. And we figured, well, what can we do as distributors? And they said, you guys need money to print. And so they came out and said, what if we prepay for our print run, our orders from you, so that you can have money to print it? And then maybe you get to make a bigger print run and stuff. And so it was actually a great example of the industry actually coming together and saying, we want to help you make this really big. And so they did, because we didn't have
and that happened into it. That was like for Unlimited, maybe. But Wayne Godfrey was the one who saved his ass on the very first. And Joanne from Cryptic who came in raising the money after I had exhausted all my friends and family and friends of family and family of friends of family and their friends.
People walking down the street.
At some point, we just needed more money, and the last 2 big chunks of money came in from those 2 sources.
Yeah. That was
I should tell that one. I feel like I'm monopolizing the time now. You go ahead.
Talk about the card backs.
Scat, you got
We
it.
were talking about the
Card
card backs on the way on the flight over here. So
Oh, yeah.
we almost made different card backs.
Yeah, so like after the Gen Con, they came out, all the Wizards of the Coast people came out to Philadelphia, probably October, I think, after that first Gen Con. And they were talking about the next sets of cards, and Richard had wanted the card backs to be different for every set. He wanted each set to be playable like a separate game. So I didn't think that was a good idea, and I remember grabbing Peter, and I was really nervous because this is the first time anyone had contradicted Richard, and that's a really scary thing because he really knows what he's doing. So I remember in that big, and then we were in one of the lecture halls.
He had a lot of power. He was on the board of directors. He was
That's right.
the largest shareholder.
Largest shareholder.
Well, Garfield Games is still a separate company. They owned it, remember?
Yeah, they couldn't split off.
Is
Operated
the
before it
right
merged.
and the inventor of the game, designer, and I was like, nope, you're wrong. They need to be the same card back. And we argued, and I think the only person that supported me was Peter in that meeting, right? It was. But Peter was keeping his mouth shut because he didn't want to contradict Richard either. But I think at the end, though, we decided.
Yeah, on that one, you learn. Even though I was young, I had already figured out one sort of thing, which is that when two people disagree in a meeting, don't resolve it there. Leave it unresolved and then circle back. And so we left it unresolved, and I went back to Richard later and said, Richard, we really need to do it this way. And I've never heard him admit that we were right on that.
To this day, he thinks it'd be totally fine if it was just all different.
Yeah.
But remember, we had sent Arabian Nights to
That was
the printer.
That was Arabian Nights. We had already sent it to the printer with different card
with
backs.
the different card backs,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I remember getting a phone call from All Star Games in LA.
Yes.
And one of the people you had stopped at, and he's like, I heard you guys gonna change the card back. I don't know how he knew this, but internet back in those days, I guess. And maybe you'd post on Usenet or something.
There's probably an ad with the box that had the.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right, we did, because the box actually showed the other
The
card
box
back
did
on
show
it.
the other.
The purple backs.
And he said, I think you're making a huge mistake, and he had all his Magic players get the phone with me. This is a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And on Monday, Card and Money starts their print run, and they just saying, this is a bad idea, here's all these reasons. And I was like getting really concerned. And so I remember going to Peter and saying, I think we need to rethink this.
You did.
And I remember we got Richard on the phone, and we had all the
So
shareholders.
we had that debate, and then she came in and said, yeah, and it was.
And then we had this, and then we had Richard on the phone. And we all kind of like, Richard, we're concerned about this, and finally he caved in. And then he said, well, what can we do? I want to have a way to know these cards came from a different set, a different set.
We had talked about that in that meeting, just printing Arabian Nights on the line.
Yeah,
on the
but we
card.
couldn't do that at that point. We needed
Right.
to come up with a symbol.
Yeah.
And so
Because the way typesetting works, we couldn't add letters, but we could add a symbol somehow.
we could add a
Oh
symbol.
yeah,
so-
see, the typesetting was happening in my basement that weekend. Actually, I should say Phil Folio's basement, but I lived there at the time.
But I remember we had all the cards. Everything was a card of money, ready to go. And so, and we called them on the Sunday,
Yeah.
and said, what can we do? And they said, well, if you have
We
a
can strip
symbol,
it in.
fax it over to us. Blow it up really big and fax it over. So I looked around for a piece of artwork that looked like Arabian-like, and we did the game Talislanta. And in Talislanta, there's all these pieces of weaponry, and there was one that looked somewhat like an Arabian sword. And so we said, hey, I'll just blow that piece. And then it was supposed to be, it's like this big in the book, right? And so we blow it up to this huge thing, it's all pixelated. And we fax it over to Cardamundi, and they
right.
shrink it down and drop it on all the cards before they go to print. And that's how we got expansion symbols on cards.
There were a lot of things that we were figuring out as we went. On that
I was
set.
like laying track down.
Because that was also the set that when they sent it to me to edit, it was just the game text.
Yes, no flavor text.
And there was no flavor text on the cards, and I just thought to myself, well, maybe there isn't flavor text on expansion sets. Maybe that's I'm used to you give me the words and I make sure that they're right, and then I send them in. And so I did that, and I sent them in, and Vic got them first and said, hey, how come there's cards with no text on them? Because there were the vanilla creatures that didn't have any rules text on them. He said, we can't have cards with no words. And I said, well, nobody gave me any flavor text. to put on. They actually paged me. I was at dinner. And we all had pagers, and I thought, it is stupid to give an editor a pager. Why does an editor need a pager? This is why.
This is fun.
Editing emergency.
Yeah.
Editing emergency.
So
Break glass.
they paged me and said, we have to have flavor text on these cards. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? Who's writing? And he said, you are. And this is, at this point, it's dinner time. It's like 6, 7 o'clock, and this thing was supposed to be due for typesetting. He had to have it that night.
That was Dave Howell's doing
Yeah,
it, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
He said and Dave is on this like weird schedule where he sleeps
30 hours a day.
yeah, he's like awake for 30 hours, and so what time he's awake and asleep moves depending on the day. And at that particular day, he said he really needed to start typesetting them at 3 a.m. So I had between 6, 7 at night and 3 a.m. to write flavor text for all the cards.
I needed them.
Yep, and that is what we did.
And there was that entire last week, the pre-press place was open 24 hours a day, and he was pretty much there 24 hours a day
IBC,
until
right?
Friday, when they closed for the night on the weekend. They would still be open during the day, but they closed for the night, so he had to leave, which is how he wound up in my basement. He's like, can I show up at your house? Like, you live near the press place.
Did he have his Amiga with him that he always types it on?
Yeah. I took my sewing machine off my sewing desk, and we put the computer on instead, and doing where I'm feeding him soup, and he finally got to the point where he's like, could you do this? I'm like, yes, I can do this.
It was typesetting in tech, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just know that there was the grids with all the art, and
No, it
then
was
there
an
were
Amiga.
there
It
were
was an
little
Amiga.
text files, and I had to drop the text files onto the art, and they would become an X.
Right.
You couldn't
'Cause
tell
they're
if you'd
EPSs.
done the right one. You just knew you'd done it, and you're like, oh. And that was where it was like 2 a.m, and he couldn't. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm still awake.
Well, we were trying to figure out things like how can you have a card that has a mana cost of more than 1 digit? How do you typeset that out? And a discussion like that could last days, trying to figure out the right way to do things. And every set at the beginning was just this constant. What's this new issue we've never had to deal with before, and how do we work it out? And who actually makes that decision? We don't know.
Yeah, I remember when Peter and I were doing putting those texts on the final magic cards of the first print run, and it was like we'd been up for about 24 hours straight.
And I was looking over your shoulder while you were moving them, and we'd say the name of the card because, like you said, you couldn't tell. It was just an X. You couldn't tell if you got the right card. So I would watch. We'd name a card, and I would watch her, make sure she selected the right file name, and drag it up there
to the right card.
Yep. Okay, that was the right one.
I'm putting Bog Wraith over here. Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Okay.
Because we'd been literally up over 24 hours straight, and it was like 4 a.m, and I was bleary-eyed, and I was just like caffeinated beyond belief, and we did that. I remember doing that.
I forgot that memory.
And just
I think
because
we all
every
got
set of
donuts.
proofs took so long to get
yeah.
the proofs, and then of course you had physical films which had to get to Belgium.
Yeah.
So yeah, the FedEx courier came to my house to get the films Sunday evenings. They would be in Belgium Monday morning.
Okay, I gotta tell a story about the first time we showed it to at Origins in 93.
God.
So we were showing. We just had cards. We didn't have anything to sell, right? We'd just gotten cards from the factory, and what happened was that I got this phone call from Luke. Magic cards are being printed, but it's a process, and we didn't understand the process, which is like you send them the files, and at some point you're going to get finished product. Well, there's points in there where you print the cards, and then you do the packaging and all stuff like that. And so it never occurred to us that we might see some cards earlier than the final packaging. So Luke calls me up from Card of Monday. He says, "Hey," he was always very calm and cool. "Hey Luke, hey Peter, we have some of the cards. Would you like to see them?" I'm like, already? Wow, printed magic cards? Yeah, I'd like to see them. Oh, okay. Well, how about if, I said, well, I'm on my way to Origins right now. We can overnight them to your hotel in Origins. I mean, overnight mail, that was barely a thing at that time. And to the hotel, I mean, all these things were just for us country bumpkins. So I go to Origins, And Richard came on that. Were you on that trip to Origins? I don't.
It was down in Texas in Fort
I don't
Worth.
think.
I don't think so.
I don't know. But I know Richard.
I was gone. This was '93.
Yeah.
I was gone the whole summer.
Yeah. So we go down to Origins, and so they put a bunch of cards in boxes. So yeah, they show up. And at my hotel, we get there, and we're seeing Magic cards. Richard was there. We're looking at his cards. He brought somebody that was in R&D. And they were building decks. And of course, the decks were really hard to build good decks, because what had happened is they had just taken one sheet of each kind, of each rarity. So they had a sheet of common cards that they cut up, and a sheet of uncommon cards, and a sheet of rare cards. So an even distribution of Magic cards for us to make decks out of, which is actually really bad. You actually want the common cards to be common. So I'm demoing at the Wizards booth. People coming up, hey, try this card game, right? And I'm showing one at a time, and some people are like, yeah, there's people like it. Well, this one guy, Phil, from War Games West, comes up, and he's like, hey, I demoed the game's Magic, and Phil's like, wow, that's a really good game. Hold on, I gotta go get Mike. And so, Phil, by the way, this is Albuquerque, is where War Games West is from.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they're all wear the cowboy hats. They all really play up the cowboy thing, right?
We're in Dallas at the time, too. So.
We were in Dallas.
Or Fort Worth. But, yeah.
So Phil goes back, and about 20 minutes later, comes back with Mike, who's a little bit taller, has got a little bit bigger hat. And he was like, come on, show Mike how to play this game. So I show Mike how to play this Magic the Gathering. We do a little demo, and Mike's like, wow, this is really good. We gotta go get Stan. so Phil might go off, and about a half hour later, they come back with an even taller guy, with an even bigger hat, right? And they come up and do the whole demo, Stan's like, wow, we gotta show this to Wayne. So the three of them go off, and about a half hour later, they all come out, and Wayne is truly an even bigger guy. I kid you not, he's got the full 10-gallon hat thing, and you see them walking up, it's like, Phil, Mike, Stan, Wayne. Boom, 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 right? I wish I'd have got a photo with totally white in the background, that's blown out. That would have just been with some cowboy music. Oh my God. Anyway, spaghetti western in the making. So Wayne comes up, gets the demo, and asks me if he can take me to dinner. And at dinner, I said, yeah, well, I said, well, we got a little financial problem. And so I said, I'll tell you what. He said, Wayne said, well, you got to get this product through customs. That was it. We'd paid enough to get the product shipped to Seattle, but not through customs. Yes. And so I said, we got all this product coming. We don't have enough money to clear customs. And he's like, well, you had it shipped anyway? Yeah, because, what else are we going to do? Ship it, we'll figure it out. Bought us 3 weeks or whatever. And so that was when Wayne's like, I said, well, let's wheel and deal. How about if you pay in advance and we give you a little bit more discount? So Lisa was like, oh, you gave him a discount? I think it was the first time you were like, oh, Peter's being innovative on the sales front.
At that stage, anything to get named.
Exactly. Oh yeah, you didn't object. You were like, yeah, good idea. Upfront pay.
Good idea.
Good going. So anyway, that
wheel and deal.
They're laughing about it now, but what they don't remember is that when it got into customs, it didn't matter if we had the money, because they were going to keep the cards, and we had a deadline for release, and all these people were all panicking because they didn't have a category to have it legally go through customs.
Right.
That's right.
And so there's this big hoopla on trying to create trading card game category so that we could get it through customs. I mean, that was a big deal. It's all these official people from, the Port of Seattle. No, we don't do things this way. And we're just like, oh, we have a different way.
I think it actually came through LA.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
I think it came. So I remember.
No, it came to Seattle.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it was LA, and I remember they trucked it up. They took part of it up the coast, and then they.
Anyway, maybe you could be right.
There's still very weak harmonized tariff codes for games. There's I look through the list and I'm like, games.
Everybody always has to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of fun telling these stories when we don't remember a lot of things. We don't have much time left, but I wanted to get at least one or two questions right there.
One thing about Magic is the art. Do you have any stories about getting the art, getting the artists?
Yes.
That, you have to tell that.
There's some good ones.
The Xerox, the original Xerox cutout decks.
Yeah.
When we were knowing it would be good, but we didn't know what it would look like, and then the first time you saw it on the Jesper's screen, you remember that?
Oh, well, the first time I saw her was at Jesper's house.
That's
Actually,
right.
been over there for a thing.
It was his mom's Christmas party or something?
Yeah, his
that.
family Christmas party.
She
I
made
remember
these
that.
like super amazing cream puffs. That's really what I
You have to tell us.
The best parties.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we knew it would be cool, but we didn't know it would look cool.
yeah. Well, now I know what story you're talking about. Okay, so yeah, so we had Jesper. We had there's a whole story there, but but Jesper was our art director, and he commissioned a bunch of art. He had just graduated from Cornish, which is an art school in Seattle, and he turned around and of course commissioned art with a lot of his people he went to Cornish with.
Well, I mean, so here, but you should back up just a teeny bit because I remember we were coming in trying to figure out how we get 300 pieces of art for how much money
no
we
money.
had, which was zero. and I remember Peter was like, well, you know artists, right? And then Jesper knew artists, and so it's like, and then we literally could afford $100 a piece. I remember.
Wait,
No,
that
no,
was
no.
half
It was
in stock.
50.
Yeah.
50.
It was 50 in stock,
50
50 in
Cash.
cash, and
That's right.
and a split of 1% of the
That's right.
sales.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Don't forget the royalties.
It's the only way we can afford it, right?
Yeah,
It had
yeah.
to be. That's
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe there's original magic artists in the room here, but I've talked to several since then, and they all thought it was worthless. They were doing it mainly as a favor to Jesper,
Yes.
because they
Or
really
me.
thought, or you,
Yeah, 'cause
they
they're
really
all
thought they were
same.
doing it for $50.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why there's early Kaya Folio art, but not early Phil Folio.
He was like, no way.
He had to get convinced that it was okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was one of the ones I couldn't convince.
yeah. And now each piece, right?
Yeah, so I think where Rick's wanting me to get to is that we commissioned art. It's a big project. There was 300 pieces of art or whatever, and a lot of art, and it's all just this sort of theoretical thing at this point. Like okay, Jesper's commissioning art. Okay, that's cool, and then so his family has this great house in Mercer Island. We all a bunch of us went over there for a big Christmas thing.
Yes.
Big Christmas party.
She was a great
And
cook.
Jesper was like, hey, come down, I got something to show you. Went down to the basement. And this house, first of all, is full of art. I mean, Jesper is like one of these people who grew up in a house of art. And you could see that. And I went down there and he had, I think it was like 14 pieces of art, the first pieces of art that we ever saw. And some of you might, if your magic trivia tests is a lot of them were Anson Maddox and Mark Tadine, which made some of the most out there art relative to the time. This is in 1992. The
That's
Lanoir.
what you want to show the shareholders.
Yeah, the Lanoir elves.
Early Minotaur.
Yeah, and we're like, yeah. And I remember the first. It's like I was like, wow, this is great. I mean, I always liked sort of edgy products anyway. Like, it was at that point. It was like, wow, this game is not only cool as a collectible card game. This whole concept, this art is going to draw people in. People are going to look at this art, and it's not to say all the art was great. There's actually some really horrible pieces of art too, but in some ways that's kind of cool. In some, I mean, it's early, it's art, but the art there was a lot of really edgy art in this set, and I remember many times, when nobody knew what Magic was, and you've got a whole bunch of Magic cards out on the table, and somebody walks by and goes, "Wow." They're looking at the art, like, wow, picking up these cards and looking at all this fantasy art, which was kind of what we originally wanted Richard to design a game that we could publish a whole bunch of fantasy art on.
No, don't you remember you actually did an art show to try to get more people to invest in the company?
And it worked.
remember you did it in your
That's where you
basement.
convinced me.
And I remember there was this whole big discussion about things like, should we put Lord of the Pit in there?
Yeah.
And that just scare them all off.
The thing that I remember from that art show is just people walk. Each of us would walk around with investors, potential investors, and kind of walk them through. And there was just like Peter, I'd be like, oh, I love these art, but I thought this art was crappy. But a lot of these people would come up and go, oh, I really like that one, and point to one that I didn't like. And then it kind of dawned on me that everybody has different tastes, and so having a set that has different kind of taste to it actually means that there's probably cards in there that people are going to like, even if they're not ones I like.
Right.
And so I thought it was kind of cool, but yeah, well, it was.
But that was also another thing we had to kind of figure out, because the way Jesper would tell people to commission the pieces was that he would just give them the title of the card.
Right.
And he wouldn't tell them anything about what does it do or how the mechanics worked or anything like that, because he wanted them to have this great creative freedom to do it. But what that meant was that we sometimes ended up with cards art that contradicted the mechanics in some way.
Yeah, we redesigned cards to match the art.
Yeah. It's like, that wasn't supposed to be a flying creature, but now it has wings. And that's not supposed to be an actual island.
And it wasn't straight through for the artists either, because the artwork itself was done at a certain size, but also had to look better shrunk down. And that's, for a bunch of kids who just graduated from Cornish, we ended up with some amazing artwork in a type of art that they never even tried at their school. And so.
Well, even the professional artists, because I was using a lot of people I'd used on Talislantor or
Right.
Swagaha or whatever, and Vampire and stuff like that. And those people all just did, covers, right?
Yeah.
So they weren't used to doing these kind of card pieces either and getting them shrunk down. So, and how to compose them, because that was the other thing. Is like no one, in your mind you're like, oh, they're these really complex pieces of art, but really they didn't have time because we were paid $50, and so they were really trying to make these things kind of simple and so they can do it fast.
Well, that would look better at size anyway.
That's true too.
But we had. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and how much was each piece worth from the original set?
Well, I do know of one art auction at NorwestCon where one piece of original magic art went for $30.
Oh, God.
And I just remember that because I had drawn a cartoon this big that sold for $60, and I was like, yes. but they weren't all high priced, but
Go a
some of them
little
went
bit
for
No, I meant
thousands,
like, what does the artist
But
artist
to the
get
artist,
paid
it
out?
was worth way more than $30.
No,
Yeah.
right, but their total payout with $50 a stock from back then,
Oh, yeah.
plus
Yeah,
the
yeah.
royalty. I think it's over $100,000 a piece.
I think it probably
Yeah.
is.
Ex-
I know a few artists became millionaires on
Yeah,
that.
I think it was over $100,000
Well,
a
because
piece.
was it 5 shares of Garfield became like 8 of Wizards,
Oh, let's not
and
do
then
that
each
math,
one was
but-
worth like.
Yeah, why not?
It
Yeah,
was,
let's not do that math.
It was like,
do
yeah.
math.
I think it was a high 5 digits. I did the math once a long time ago, and I think
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
high 5 digits.
They
So
did-
what
they
they
did
got the
okay.
$50,
And then later.
but the long term, each of those pieces of art ended up being worth close to $100,000.
But I just wonder about the people who's like sold an original for 30 and then it wound up like that
Being-
to them, like their total payout was just dwarfed anything the original.
Yeah.
worth.
There was a odd level of naivety amongst us. Not that
Oh,
we
yeah.
were claimed there would be, because we were in our 20s and we knew everything. But so, for instance, Peter's and my phone number got out,
Yeah.
and the number of calls we got, and we didn't even think, oh, we don't mind if fans call us. And then
But then they started asking rules questions.
we have to change our perspective of that. But we also had product at home, and we had no idea about the fact that our home should actually become a vault. And so.
Oh, you're in the garage, remember?
And no. Once we had moved.
Oh, okay.
So we had our own collection, and it was in our basement, and you could easily get into it, and they did. I mean, so it was interesting how. I guess there's a level of trusting going on, and I wouldn't want to lose that level of trusting, but it never even dawned on us that people would break into places to get these cards. And so we were by no means unique, because we were hearing across the board that retailers were being broke into for cards whenever they got a shipment, because everybody could only get, everybody was on a diet as to how many cards they could have. And so it just was something we couldn't have even guessed about. I know we had a few people that had their cars delivered in those
Brinks truck.
armored cars delivering it.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
So, what made you guys decide to make the card game more than just a card game and attach a story to the set? Because
Did we do that?
We did do that.
Not at first, but
Not in the very beginning. It took a while.
Antiquities, right? Was the first one.
Antiquities and yeah.
Did you want to talk about that one?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it was because, why did we do that? We did it, I think, really to make it almost easier to design. We thought that it could support a story and should have one, and we didn't really quite know how to do it, which is why the Antiquities story is sort of on purposely done like as though you were accessing it through these different fragments, not necessarily in order. And I think it made the set. I mean, basically, it made the set easier to design, and then we thought that from that, then we could do extra stuff, right? Like whatever, books, novels, that sort of thing. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We were actually very, very unsure whether the card game could support a story, because of just like I said, you don't come through it in a certain order. So we bent over backwards for Antiquities to try to make it that it could be that way.
Which was a change because in the very early, the original Magic cards, Alpha, Beta, and maybe Unlimited, the quotes on the cards were mostly from famous literature, classical literature.
Or we made shit up.
Or you just made, a lot of it was just made up.
We just made shit up, which is close to the story.
Yeah.
But we did have this idea that maybe this would be an effective way to make stories. I'm not sure it ever really was that. I mean, it did, sell some novels, but.
Well, and when you did do that for Antiquities, nobody told me that there was supposed to be a story.
No one told you that?
No one told me that.
Oh, sorry. There's supposed to be a story in Antiquities.
We were afraid you would overthink it, Beverly.
But it turned into it was actually a thing, because I was trying to sort out, hey, is this character who's on this card also supposed to be on this card, and is that the same guy? Well, especially because somebody, I don't remember which character, somebody spelled one of the characters' names slightly differently in different places, and I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be the same one or not. And I'm trying to ask, whichever random R&D person I can get a hold of at this moment, and that person didn't know which way it was supposed to be spelled, and so there was this whole long thing. And then I finally got a hold of one of you guys who sat me down and explained to me, oh, this is a story, and this is how this works out, and then,
One of the issues is that it's very natural for people to try to apply a story to something that has a bunch of rich tidbits, and they try to they will try to make their own connections about how this card over here. Look, he's carrying a symbol that goes with this card over here. Maybe there's something going on here, and we just don't know. But our book division was starting to get big too, because we ended up with TSR and their books, and so we had a small book division that was highly interested in making sure we could go the book route. So they were all about wanting to make sure the stories made sense, and they were all continuity. And
We
Oh,
had Herbert Collins come in, so
Yeah.
Although that was all after.
yeah.
Yeah,
but that was a
little
long
bit later.
ways down that line.
I think we'll take one more question and we'll be basically done. All right, you got it.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision making that went into the Chronicles print run and all the
Chronicles?
Chronicles.
Yeah, basically this had to do with trying to get the game to be played as a game, sort of fairly and competitively. And the problem was the card prices were too high, for those old cards. So basically it was, we're going to stick everything we can that's going to be legal and playable into 4th edition. And the stuff that we couldn't stick into 4th edition, we're just going to reprint it in Chronicles. So that people that didn't have access to all the cards that had shorter runs would be able to buy them, basically at retail price.
But with white borders.
But with white
So they weren't
borders,
as-
right? Because we didn't, from the playing side, we didn't care about the white border versus black border, but from, so that was a stop to the collectors.
There was also-
So like the stuff that they had wasn't completely worthless. It was interesting that the people were really, really, really upset about those decisions when they first came out, especially Chronicles. I mean, they were really mad. And an interesting thing happened is within a year after that, when cards would be reprinted, the black border price would go up, not down, because then that would be legal in tournament play. So that was like a really strong sign that the tournaments and the competitive scene was actually driving the price is not just strictly based on scarcity. Because I mean, a lot of people liked the cards originally just because they were scarce, right? So we really had to make, if we're going to grow, we had to make a concerted effort to not have that be the case.
There was one other aspect, and that was that we were starting to get international partners that were doing it in local languages, and they weren't starting with, you know, alpha and then doing, you know, they were starting later, and so Chronicles helped them catch up a little bit because they were starting with like 4th edition, but they had, you know, we had a few people. We had like Italian Legends, and then I think Dark might have been in a few languages, but there was, you know, Ice Age maybe was the first one that kind of really got broad, but you know, it was for them. It was just it was a good way to catch up. So there was a international aspect to it too.
Well, and that was another thing we had to figure out how to do, because as soon as we started doing translations,
Oh, yeah,
we
how
had
do
to
you-
start worrying about, oh, now we can't design cards where the mechanics are so long that they won't work in German. And I remember having this whole long discussion about
Or
coming up with
Finnish.
a mathematical algorithm for how long could the card be in English and still fit the box in German.
We did have cards in Ice Age where the rules were too long for English. like Ice Cauldron, you know, Ice Cauldron's microtext fills everything. We got the borders pushed up so that they're like abutting the things, and it's still not all the rules for the card. So.
Well, and there were at least 3 cards where I said, there's just no way I can't make this shorter and still make it do what you want it to do. You need to change what the card does.
Did we actually put cards in unglued that had stuff that ran onto a
Yeah,
card?
Yeah, but that's a gimmick, yeah. All right, we need to flip this room, get to the next retrospective panel.